Alright, so these are some of the key landmarks that you're going to want to use for your ankle palpation. So, ankle and foot, that is. So the foot and ankle, obviously there's a lot of bones, so there's a lot of bony landmarks to help you locate these. And I'm going to start on the medial side of the foot. So one of the most prominent and a good starting point is going to be your first metatarsal phalangeal joint. So that's going to be essentially the ball of your foot on the medial side here. So this is going to be where your metatarsal bone meets up with the first phalange, and it's a really good just starting off spot to orient yourself to the rest of the foot. When I palpate the first metatarsal, I like to palpate it at the top and the bottom, because then I can kind of follow it back and get a good grasp of where that bone ends. As we get into the midfoot, it gets a little bit more difficult to identify the structures, only because you have so much connective tissue holding everything together. It's a very sturdy part of your foot, so being able to distinguish gets a little bit more difficult. So I follow this back here, and you can manipulate the person's foot as well. So if you want to move that metatarsal around a little bit to see where you're at, that can help as well. So I'm going to work my way back. I'm going to come upon my first cuneiform here. And so this is going to be the cuneiform that's the largest. It articulates with that first metatarsal. And then in the midfoot, it gets a little bit hairier trying to find the other ones. But here's your middle, or your second, and then your third cuneiform. And those are going to match up with your second and your third metatarsals here. Once you find your first cuneiform, you can travel back here with your thumb, and really the next prominent bony area, that's going to be your navicular tubercle. So it sticks out pretty well. It's pretty easy to palpate. It's going to be right in this area, a little bit more anterior to the medial malleolus. As you can see, my thumb is anterior or in front of the medial malleolus, and that's going to be our navicular tubercle. From there, I think the next easiest one is going to be your obvious one, your medial malleolus. And if you draw a line between your medial malleolus here and the navicular tubercle, and you kind of stick your thumb into that divot there, that little depressed area, if you start to evert the foot, you'll actually feel the talar head coming out of that spot right there. The talar head that is rotating within that mortise joint. And so you can actually take the person's foot, invert and evert it, and you can feel that talar head moving around. That's a good spot to feel that there. Back at the medial malleolus, if we drop down, we're going to run into our sestentaculum tali. It's not as prominent as your navicular tubercle. It's a little bit more flat in nature, but you'll still be able to feel a bump here. And oftentimes it's pretty tender to touch. This is where our spring ligament, that's a big, huge supporter of the medial arch, originates, and it attaches at the navicular tubercle over here. So if you suspect that someone would have an injury in the spring ligament, palpating in this area is going to light them up quite a bit. So there's going to be your navicular tubercle, and your sestentaculum tali. And definitely feel these things on yourself as well, and you'll get to feel what they feel like and the tenderness of it. Navicular tubercle is very bony, and it's not as tender to feel, but the sestentaculum tali is. From there, you can drop back, and you can actually feel your calcaneus, which is a gigantic, huge bone in the back here. And so those are the major structures of the medial side that you're going to want to know and palpate and orient yourself with. For the lateral side of the foot, Again, a good place to start is going to be your, sorry, we're a little bit out of, is going to be your fifth metatarsal phalangeal joint. So you can just grab that here with your finger and your thumb, and you can start to really trace this bone, this metatarsal bone, the fifth metatarsal bone, back until you get to the point where it flares out and you have your styloid process here. The styloid process is a really important area. It gets fractured often in an inversion mechanism. It also is the attachment point for your peroneus brevis muscle. So the peroneus brevis comes down on the lateral side and attaches here to the styloid process. Your peroneus longus comes down around the medial or the lateral malleolus underneath and actually attaches at the base of the first over here. So that's a really important landmark there, and it's an easy one to find. It's pretty prominent on most people. From there, you'll want to dive back, and you'll start to feel even more of an indentation or like a curvature. And that's going to be your cuboid bone right there. And the cuboid bone articulates with the fifth and the fourth metatarsal joints. So the cuboid is going to be here in this area. From there, you'll want to keep moving back, and the next real bony prominence you're going to feel is going to be your peroneal tubercle, and that's going to be almost directly underneath the lateral malleolus here. It's a nice prominent tubercle. It's kind of long actually in nature, so you can really put your thumb on it and feel that really nicely. And that's just an important landmark as it actually splits the peroneal tendons, the longus and the brevis, as they come down to the styloid process. So that is a good spot to know there. The peroneal tubercle is located on the calcaneus, so technically we are on the calcaneus right now. The other huge landmark obviously is going to be your lateral malleolus, and then which is actually going to be technically your distal fibular head here. And from there, if we move anteriorly, we can actually see this nice depression here, but you can really put your thumb in there, and that's going to be where you can rotate the ankle again and start to feel the talus coming in and out of that space there. And so with our thumb in this area, and if you move the foot into an everted position, that talus starts to pop out, and you can start to visualize what that looks like and how that would stress the anterior talofibular ligament that's located right here. This is going to be your number one ligament that's sprained in an inversion mechanism. So when your foot is in an inverted and then even rotated slightly downward in a plantar flex position, that's when it's going to be the most susceptible. Think about when you step in a hole, when you trip, when you roll your foot over to the side. That's the big one there. You're going to get a lot of swelling and pain when you touch in that area if you suspect a ligament sprain. Straight down from your lateral malleolus, that's going to be the area where you're going to feel your calcaneofibular ligament. That's also going to be damaged in an inversion sprain. This is usually the second most damaged ligament. And then on the posterior side, that's where your PTF is going to be, your posterior tibiofibular ligament. And that one is hardly ever damaged, so we don't have to worry too much about that. Coming to the back of the heel, this is where you're going to feel the insertion points of the Achilles tendon, as well as the associated bursa that's in this area. So right back here. And then at the very bottom of the foot, on the medial side, that's where you're going to be able to feel the attachment of the plantar fascia at the heel, or actually the origin of the plantar fascia here on the heel. So if you have a plantar fasciitis issue, being able to palpate this area right here the medial tubercle of the calcaneus is going to be very painful for that person. As far as the medial ligaments go, it's very hard to identify the borders of the deltoid ligament, and that's okay. The deltoid is going to be located in this area here. So it's a very broad triangular ligament, and just think about it as in that spot where we can start to feel and palpate that talar head coming into this space. And then eversion mechanism, that's going to be what's going to cause the ligament sprain. So in here, right kind of anterior but distal to the medial malleolus is where you're going to find that deltoid ligament. And as far as ankle and foot palpations go, those are the big major ones that you guys will want to know and orient yourself with to be able to find the majority of the structures that you need to find.